There is a frustration of leaders retired and standing, needing to blame the hyperforeign. Nature itself is showing us needs to blame a hyperforeign, not names A through Z, but to blame the hyperforeign properly because it's actually there, discernible. Even if it's no longer standing, there was a human fact tribute nature breaching method that we could observe. But where we could observe it, we could also observe other things, others, ourselves, being and having been, self-valued having been, being and having been, blamed for things that our founders told us to blame in the breaching method. And with the telling us this, they also described how and why not to entertain anyone other than James Madison pretended as one of their names, plural, known. The America's founders, plural, were unknown for the same reason they had to leave slavery entrenched. That is not clear because when people attack because our campuses were trained by a hyperforeign, but where it did that, it did it through ourselves and through foreign per a method that keeps everyone collusion / us blaming other things, others, ourselves for nature's own demonstrations of the proverbial devil, the proverbial shaitan, that we are to name a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, which is more probably with the devil and with the... See, we learn some things through the nature of religion. Some things we learn through the nature of education. We're in how we know, and we knew since we were little kids. We were shown, and there were confessions tied to how, because there are confessions that are made to the breaching method at countries A through Z that no one ever discerned, but we sensed it. Blaming other things, others, ourselves, for what nature itself, wow, what our founders themselves communicated. But everyone missed the founders part, but not the nature part. We had black pupils, whites of eyes, not to miss the nature part. To know that not real integrity spoke with passions and emotions, or with calmness, or with the difference between that. As behavior racketeering worse than war crimes that we know was entrenched at countries A through Z, and then America's founders were born. But they have maintained America's people and leaders incapable of speaking for that properly because of how they entertained all that was left unsaid, leaving out what our founders declassified about that. About why and how even themselves, everyone was measured and maintained. That's why they had to leave slavery entrenched. You don't vote on slavery if you could speak about the Constitution unabridged, let alone for nature. Having black pupils, whites of eyes is inseparable with the breaching method simultaneously from correlation / hypercorrelation, proper to speak for our America's founders or any other modern countries. Our campuses have collusions with the foreign attackers of it and our homeland's attackers of it. Forgiveness, for example, if you teach little kids that America's founders owned slaves, they're right for calling them names. Especially, in other words, because if they try to communicate honestly, they're sensed. And I could explain to you guys how, but you guys won't even allow me to use that which is hyper-evidentially recorded, even though the hyper-evidential isn't formally defined. There are witch trials. There's a witch trials place next to Webb Stevens Museum. The Webb Stevens Museum. It was first renamed Webb House, not the Webb Stevens Museum Webb House. And only permitted were collusion / us against other people, others, ourselves. For example, entertaining laws that were against all women. Therefore, every age and nature of every family. Laws that were against every native. Therefore, all natural distinctions / us. So against everybody. Laws against black pupils, whites of eyes. Northern colonies and southern colonies. rolls with that, and then America's founders were born. That is not clear because there have been collusion slash S. And this breaching method knew there would be. Nature's demonstration of itself. So since before religious messengers were born, it forced, checked, hurt, and persuaded. A through Z. The names that could only operate the phenomenon of countries A through Z. It forced, checked, hurt, it hurt those people. Forced, checked, hurt, and persuaded them. Not even realizing more and more to blame other things, others, or ourselves, while simultaneously increasingly valuing that having been done, while simultaneously being used remotely, shown too. They need to hide that in the future and how to get away with doing it. By that identity of hyper sophistication, so to speak, that needs us to have debates about sophistication or peace, pretending not discernible, is the difference between criminal insidious natures of peace and peace, let alone collusion slash S, with the difference between that or use slash as if it collusion slash S. That is multi-front consciously against three identities of hyper invisible but still discernible connected parts of the human body, of the human fact-shaping nature. It is, in other words, nature's body is projecting to us that and how we are distinct from the other species' bodies, but we are also non-distinct from them. And we are simultaneous with them. But with the hyper additionally, there is a distinct identity of simultaneous nature that is neither us nor them. So even if we don't agree to call it the hyper simultaneous, it is discernible what I mean. And see, people jump into people's conversations dishonestly. Oh, then bring it to the courts. We weren't supposed to leave out the collusions between the courts that were only capable of. They were forced, checked, hurt, persuade. This is why witch trials, even if they're completely made up, regardless who made them up, what reason, why there's a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. And then and now, there and other founding locations across the country, other is communicated for the plural founders of America about why and how to leave their name on. Their name is not pretended known. And about why and how James Madison is the only name we know as our founder. That's because he's not just because he's rolls with the Bill of Rights. In other words, he described how no one wanted rolls with slavery. No one wanted rolls with impositions against nature itself, against all women, against Native. Those exceptions are where the people are all forcing with the breaching method a quality of fact-shaping nature that is worse than just criminally foreign influenced. Specifically to keep things like criminal foreign influence blamed and countered wrongly as collusion slash S. And they needed to hide that and having been used remotely the whole time, all sides of it. Overt criminal enterprises and private ones are manifest at and next to Harvard Hospital. There's a Judge Killian involved with digital crime. They just speaking fake things into tape recordings. If you see the subject treatments, they're criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw takes on American history. How this is gotten away with is relative. We're supposed to surface with James Madison declassified about why and how nobody had free speech. We know that slavery was entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies to know that. And if anyone tried to pretend, and it was against it was against all human differences multi-front for the description of it, where and how all identities of integrity were only permitted to be self-cultivated collusions with the only permitted hyper-foreign, entrenched, propagated not even fully discerned. Breaching method /S, not discerned because the /S part was hid behind and through. It is a hypercollusion /S. Ooh, boxing, but makes us shush to hear. Boxing. Boxing's but makes no sound but shush, or preferring the shush sound. Sometimes martial arts prefer the shush sound, and wrestling does not prefer the shush sound. And all the sciences share an identity. That one way /S is in demonstration /S of how it is, all things while not but any way. And further its way here, or a special difference is forced away from here, as force space nature transfer, as lethal hadith, as more probably. The ancients of pantheism appreciated and taught this. Those who revealed English before the sciences became criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, regardless of who was the fault, but from off the campuses increasingly, hyper additional collusion /S there though. And the difference of it, the guilt there, next to it, conjunctive to it, or other databases. All nature of data and intelligence appreciation is and has been worse than criminally foreign influence. Again, to keep things like criminal foreign influence is blamed. Not one has trained boxing. Our founders left us to have non-lawyers like myself be allowed free speech to demonstrate that lawyers have stayed collusion /S with the breaching methods use of the names of the people of sciences and the counters to them. And the difference. Forgiveness is because there is another name that is increasingly being and haven't been demonstrated. Like, for example, as the scientific value itself, the name of the scientific value itself of the human fact-true nature breaching method, that all those distinct multi-front human rights violation, human rights abuses only permitted are about. There are ones that our government tells us we don't want anything to do with it. But they communicate exceptions, though, because of how a breaching method abused them. The people of countries A through Z, at locations, areas, and states. The specific way, though, forcing other things, others, ourselves, for example, to be blamed. Right where and how nature itself, with our founders. Again, but our founders, that's why we're one of the reasons we're supposed to all know clearly since we were younger kids. The only founder that they had the security to let us know the name of was James Madison. And he explained fully how and why he and nobody wanted roles with slavery. And why and how he and nobody had free speech while simultaneously everyone had to pretend other to an extent /S, or they were sensed and that was adapted to. Means them and everyone around them was hurt and way worse. Let's all rehearse. It means boxings. What makes us shush to hear. The shadow box. Because we're supposed to be exercising. And this is one of the ways. This is a part of the way /S. The only way /S. To reveal evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere. Of a nature that one of the ways we know it's its way. And is because it reveals things, including where and how we are fact-true nature, quality is fact-true nature. It reveals means out of nowhere. That only increasingly positive value everywhere at once. There's a difference between making hyper positives out of negatives and of making criminal insidious natures of positives out of negatives, let alone making criminal and seditious natures of positives out of negatives, because a breaching method needs increasingly how it's keeping that the outcome / asset locations, areas, and states. And what is keeping not just nature's demonstration / S of itself, a breaching method is a scientific value replaced with the syntax and the appreciation of the sciences. In a fact-achieving nature at countries A through Z, with sciences A through Z, departments of campuses A through Z, the campuses of the Campus Marcia system of the Republic for which we stand, which is reliant upon pantheism, that is more probably demonstrably having been discerned, been named pantheism by and as a method all about seeing through isms, including its own, to make sure, and for nature's method of checking. Because nature is distinctly itself, its complete identity, as a hyper invisible but still discernible. From how it is the invisible but still discernible, also it itself has different distinct identities. You have distinct identities of relationship to yourself, the parts of yourself, as your complete identity. Even temporary, all temporary nature at the same time is a part of nature's complete identity. That is, it is simultaneously increasingly valuable to itself, as itself, coming to, from, as, with, and for itself, from inside itself. And this it shows. But we are prevented short words about this, which even if we are non-lawyers, and lawyers will agree, there is a predicate with facts method / S that we could discern with Black people's whites of eyes and nature alone, even with disturbed takes on American history. See, counterposition everywhere, every state sickly distinctly has American history taught wrong, but also sickly non-distinctly. Hyper positive can be made out of that. A breaching method keeps showing everyone to make criminal and seditious natures of positives out of negatives. Then and right now, it's showing them they need to hide that by valuing that having been done, and by valuing all speculation, all perspective, all vision of the sciences, reliant upon criminal and seditious natures of principal treatments and or exceptions, and Boolean logic treatments and or exception nature treatments. Appreciation through an as systems tactical ulterior from the only one that can answers our question, shows us the answers this way. We are shown we are an individual species, body of individuals with all group differences generated by that which is neither us nor them, but is all things anyway. And with this further, we are shown that's one identity relationship to itself, but while it has another identity relationship to itself, and both of those are only increasing value. An identity of forever nature is showing us that and how it is making more of itself. And a legion and tribes, there are proofs first, or it is more probable, practical. How are you? Happy holidays, Merry Christmas. So in other words, there is a proverbial devil, a proverbial shaitan, but it had to be said through cipher for us to decipher, including America's founders. They left declassified for it. Doesn't even have to be deciphered. But if we speak about it honestly, it brings up people that already had roles since everyone was a kid, replacing how James Madison and the plural founders had declassified for us to understand they had to counter extort everyone. And the only founder that they had security to let us know was definitely one of the plural founders that enabled that counter extortion was James Madison. So in other words, but they're still teaching American history wrong because those words that were left, and now they say, well, that's science. This is the syntax. This is the records. And see, that's also defended by nature as a sense and sensibilities, to use Jane Austen's phrase. We're still the lawyers in the interbranch in all sides of criminal and civil cases, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, countries A through Z, international companies. The differences of guilt, collusions with that, all natures of news, exceptions, at the same time with the same sequence shifts. We're supposed to step back. Forgiveness is to discern all those collusions while being used also by that which we're not supposed to forgive. But if we pay attention to that, we are sensed. How's that? We are sensed. Because even if it's a leader of a country, because how are you? How many beer? I don't drink. In other words, some years I go a whole year I don't even drink. Sometimes I'll have, I don't usually get drunk. I mean, I got drunk once or twice in my life when I was a kid. But I'll tell you something, the people involved with databases, they've been putting people involved with just fake uses of alcohol. Then they were shown need to hide that also at other locations /s. All ages and natures of investigators at the same time, though. All these countries are shared at the campuses. At the same time, overt criminal enterprises, private ones that no one wanted collusions with. They're kept needing to hide the same sequence shifts, needing to self-value in the same relative delusions too. So this is not a rant. This is about we have black pupils, whites of eyes. And America's founders declassified about how a breaching method reassigned what nature communicates with black pupils, whites of eyes. When nature is not only itself as criminal insidious nature and or hyper criminally foreign influenced, which is distinct from saying criminally foreign influenced. And I'm not even a lawyer because criminal foreign influence is one of the things that the breaching method forces, tricks, hurts, persuades all sides, and counters to it, collusion /s with, so it can keep everyone blaming other things, others, or selves for itself. So when nature demonstrates that too later, and at the time, itself is left out and everyone's sensing for itself left out and self-valued, right where no one self-values collusion /s. This is why we have to pay attention to what they've been doing with the databases and use the self-right to lie where they don't have the right to lie, which are simultaneously collusion /s with predicate acts methods manifest that a breaching method uses and used to show names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, crime scenes, and interbranch and intelligence, and then further hyper additionally with the state offices of corrections and of judicial branch officers. They need to hide lie progression from things past what is actually recorded. Relativity /hyper relativity right now. They have measure and maintain victims /hyper victims with syntax nature regarding theories on relativity. While black people's whites of eyes are about relativity /hyper relativity. And who denies it has inherent to, active to, and progressive to. Their logic, their nature of logic demonstration /s of the same. The breaching method used and uses that to show interbranch names from Connecticut, for example, through their careers and since before they were interbranch and foreign. They never had not, in other words, for example, the news confessed, demonstrators recorded, confessing, demonstrating, confirmed they steal people's identities, fake conversations with people next to crime scenes as collusion/s, including with campuses. Now they can't afford to have discern what's discernible relative to any of the school shootings. These are intelligence families and campuses roles with Sandy Hook campuses, but also inter-campuses, interstates, and intra-cities, inter and intra-campuses. Hyper additionally, the differences of guilt there are people tied to or with other databases. And there are always layers of other countries and bodies, even overt criminal enterprises at the same time. You're not trying to say anything. That's why you're not trying to have a conversation. How is that rant saying that there's the black pupils, whites of eyes? We have a means to discern that there's worse than criminal incompetence having left this out while leaving out the breaching method. One of the things the little kids in the suburbs distinctly from, but also non-distinctly from the kids in the cities have been trying to say, even little kids can discern it. There's a human factual nature breaching method entrenched here. But while they're saying it, everyone's in defense/s of arguments and bullying logic, A, therefore B, and or exceptions that can't defend that and afford to defend it at the same time. Those same basic principle treatments. Black people's whites of eyes alone are enough to show that, and we have means to discern too. Recorded how research locations, polling campuses, all ages and natures of campuses, including fire campuses and medical campuses, how they are used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw, every nature of conjunction to them. Certain type of victim/hyper victim, great people, we're supposed to support them. But it doesn't mean we're supposed to not support things still. Tactical terror then only is allowed. Everyone has self-biased collusion/us with all readings of statutes and precedents being having and been collusion/us. Worse than criminal incompetent. I don't know his name myself. A colonel is famous for having said, "Don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes." That's one of the only things that campuses, that locations, areas, and states did good on teaching people. It's like one of the only things that everyone remembers, even if they don't remember the colonel's name. And this is relative to where and how James Madison communicated distinctly from what he said. And what he communicated was that what everyone said, we're not supposed to appreciate that, pretending there wasn't a breaching method involved, pretending that to a great extent/s, everyone knew they were being measured and maintained. But through ourselves and through the natures of industries, jobs, teams, the news locations, everyone with the same sequence shifts, the same faked identities of integrity. Our founders left us to explain how the breaching method had roles with why and how people voted on slavery and pretended that we had that. We had roles with that. All sides with that. That we're leaving out the breaching method. That's collusion/s, only capable, only permitted. Because the breaching method was, because of how it was entrenched as a method/s, only discernible correctly if that breaching method is blamed. And so we have to assign guilt. We could do it to a breaching method itself, as we're everyone wrong at the same time, and blame it though, because it made countries blame each other wrong until it was correct, and then exploit that too. And only capable more and more of everything, nature demonstrations of that valuing the blame balancing other souls more and more. And confessions made to the breaching method that way. And each country's identity /S making confessions to everyone else around them about their collusion /S. The people to the presidents and leaders, and the leaders to the people. And that where they have excuses, no one will let the other one give those excuses. And they're also incapable of it because of how campuses A through Z were sickly distinctly and are sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly. And self-valued sickly how sickly non-distinctly hurt. But self-valued where how subjects and reactions to it and or non-reactions to all nature's demonstration /S of it. A breaching method was an identity of hyper-sophistication /S that knew it would be at those locations. It knew it would be at all locations /S. It designed the suburbs to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures in a way /S that no one could discern. But everyone would have nature demonstrating to them in a way that the breaching method already employed all kinds of natures of of criminally worse than criminally foreign influence. Identities of fact, nature, quality aspects of nature pretending to need, not to pretend to understand things. You need to fake things, you need to value them having been faked non-distinctly at campuses A through Z. Specifically to keep A through Z blaming A through Z for that which is hyper-additional as in the human fact tribute nature as a virus, more like a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. Even if it is non-existent, this is more probably and is demonstrably what more than one religion at the same time is communicated for us to address. How the names of the people, the sciences, and the people countering them were used remotely at the same time and with the press in all natures of exceptions. The difference of guilt there are names next to them. Where one of the ways we could discern the breaching method is through its use /S of location /S. And it is a predicate. Excuse me. Honesty has means capable of discerning a predicate acts with facts method /S. Collusion /S. Only being and having been only permitted. Self-valuable collusions with it have only been permitted. Or that body was sensed. Even when they bring up color, the breaching method is left out. George Washington detailed about how the breaching method worked. The names of the people of the sciences had obligations to make this clear. A little kid could understand it. Instead, they have it pretended it's complicated. They need to self-value the people attacking the names of the people of the sciences and people defending them as collusion /S with the identity theft, fraud, slander method against any and everyone. Each database holds lies to play the human species volume science rise. Hyper-contained. Not one has trained. You can't trace it through wealth and things like that. All it needed was A through Z. The locations, areas, and states, everywhere the species body is the only ones who could operate the names of countries A through Z. Once it got them all blaming other things, others ourselves for things that it caused and was maintaining. And there are proofs is maintaining. The World Trade Center attack, for example, we know no one allows the hyper-evidential associated with that to be demonstrated. You guys have recorded hyper-evidentially recorded self-value collusions we could discern. Right where no one self-values, collusion/S. Pretending not to realize that there were only three branches of government and news, and they could overlook. Say, "Oh, that's not my job, though," and everyone relies on others, and everyone's overlooking. People using all kinds of predicate acts with facts methods, stacking fake transcripts and databases, shown needs to hide that at other locations/S. In other words, there are people that can't even afford to have what's actually recorded at campuses filmed 24/7 to be discerned. For how they're also being used to pretend fake things are recorded that never were. Put fake ties, fake nature ties to people. These are also people involved with the border states and the border countries and all the other countries, the differences of guilt, too. Excuse me. Where we could trace where and how leading up to the World Trade Center attack and since how they individually grouped and together where they make subject treatments and campuses they share, like Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College. They have collusion/S with the same house/S. Further involved with interbranch switching names. And with the collusion/S with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases. Multiple police departments intercities. Multiple police forms, too. And multiple forms of the same nature of court. And people from the different natures of court, like the district court, the Connecticut Superior Courts, probate courts, and the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices originally still used the way all locations/S different/S were used collusion/S self-value and or as role sensing anybody not self-value collusions or collusions blaming other things other themselves for nature's demonstration/S of that. The /S part was to hide behind and through by that which we are obligated to blame immediately as the hyperforeign. And to hyper means stack, understanding for the human species body of names A through Z, but understanding where and how even the suburbs were designed to act only permitted with torture, extortion, slavery method, the same one that has our founders blamed for it and has them framed. That's why our founders knew that the campuses and the counters to them would be collusion/S, big sides with difference/S. We are different from the other species bodies, but we are also non-distinct from them. And we are simultaneous with them, but also for a different identity of simultaneous nature. That is not us nor them, while it is all things anyway. In many pray. It is the force, while not, but anyway. It is more finite, and with active relativity to all things. It is of as that which Buck sings. Thank you, people. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Happy holidays. Discern.